Well, it's just formally welcome everyone here to the today's meeting of the Social Development Committee, and just routine housekeeping. Just could advise all members or all people in the room to switch off all electronic devices and so on, because they do interfere with the system. Could advise members in particular that to remind themselves of the protocols around the use of electronic tablets and so on. Could I ask any members of the committee to declare any interest relevant to today's agenda? I'll also declare, then we move on to apologies. To declare apology on behalf of Vicky Bailey and Dolores Kelly. Any other apologies to declare? None other to record.
Paula Bradley.
Paula Bradley, thanks, Gary. Could I formally welcome then the membership of the committee, Gary Middleton. Gary, you're welcome to your first meeting of the committee, and find the committee interesting and productive for the remainder of your time here in office. Okay, so just to remind members of the very key important elements of this here today is that we have to remind ourselves that committees are phasing out the provision of refreshments at committees. So I believe that the committee will continue with tea and coffee up to the summer recess and cease this from the beginning of the next session in September. So,
no tea or coffee?
okay. So, just to remind you, so have an extra cup of coffee today if you so wish.
Bring a packed lunch.
Okay.
Coffee break during the evening.
Okay, so then could I just go back to the draft minutes of the last meeting. So draft minutes from the meeting of the 16th of April on page 5 of your meeting pack. Members content with the minutes as drafted for accuracy. Agreed. That. Then on to auditor raising. Members recall that we had to reschedule the meeting scheduled for the 7th of May due to the forthcoming elections, and we subsequently agreed to hold a meeting on the morning of Tuesday 28th of April, that's next Tuesday coming, to continue scrutiny of the regeneration bill, just so that we comply with the time frame for committee stage. Committee stage does obviously end on the 20th of May, so it's essential that we would move ahead with this. So members then content that we retain the meeting then scheduled for Tuesday.
What time is it?
I think, well, it's up to us to agree, but can we suggest, I mean, we could go a bit earlier, but I know I understand people for travelling in might not suit. So 9:30, 10 o'clock. One item agenda, but it's important.
So it wasn't a lunchtime meeting then?
Sir,
I don't think we really
hasn't been agreed the time. It's for the committee.
Well, I think you're right. We made it mentioned lunchtime. Yeah. But it's up to entirely down to members, so we can agree. Go to lunchtime if that suits. Hopefully, it's a one-item agenda. Hopefully, we'll go through with the official here today the regeneration bill concerns that people may well have, and then what we intend to do is to go to the informal clause by clause process, and then complete the formal clause by clause on the Thursday.
Right.
So, we want to go for a lunchtime meeting then? But that would be what, 12:30? 12:30. Okay. 12:30 Tuesday.
The business committee meets at 12:30 Tuesday, so I would be 15-20 minutes late.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
It's always.
Okay. And we think we advise then that the Phase 3 report of the committee's inquiry is scheduled for Tuesday, 12th of May. And I think a total of 2.5 hours have been allocated for this particular debate. I'm told it's likely to be scheduled over the course of the 2 days. Is that right? What's the procedure there?
Well, there's just been some formal discussions. Is that it's likely to begin in the morning, and then there will be a break for lunch, then question time. So it's likely to maybe span the morning and the afternoon, as opposed to one big block. What timings have yet to come out? That might change.
Okay, and I'm advised also then that the report will be returned from the printers by Friday the 1st of May. It's proposed therefore to be circulated to all members on Monday the 4th of May. Some members may offer a hard copy report only, and many will not be in Parliament buildings. This is just in terms of receipt of, because members may not be here that week, particularly during the election week. So just for advising people, then it'll be left in for your receipt here, or for collection here. So you may want to make arrangement those members who won't be here have any of their colleagues in the building that could collect them for them, or make sure they're posted to them.
Chairman, just on the release of the report, how will that be secured in terms of and a safeguard against any advance circulation for the debate?
Well, I think they're notified as confidential and embargoed, so the same rules will apply to this report as it would apply to anything that we tabled in the business.
That's essentially what we're being concerned about.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we have any additional mechanisms that we can deploy, really outside of our responsibility, you know what I mean? In fact, I was actually surprised and I contacted Kevin a week or more ago because I got an email to say there was a manuscript in the business office, and I thought,
That's right.
what's that about? And I contacted Kevin to find out what it was, but that's apparently it's a done thing. I'd never
It's a
noticed.
standard practice, man.
Standard.
Totally standard. Just that even though once the committee signs off on it, even though it's quite a printers and all the rest of that, they go for action as a manuscript form. So that was news to me, but there you go. Just to remind people that it is an embargoed report, and that's why we're advising people also that will be here available from on the 4th of May for members, but members may not be here, so you just need to make arrangement to have receipt of it. Okay. If we move on then to the point, which is the regeneration bill, and this is a consideration of issues. Again, we've just covered there, we're going to have their session next Tuesday and then hopefully complete our consideration of the bill on Thursday. So the department were here obviously last week and went through a number of issues which had been raised by stakeholders and so on. There's still, I think, some outstanding matters. So I then formally invite the department officials here to the committee this morning. Again, with Henry McCardle, Ian Snowden and Anthony McDade. And welcome the three of you here this morning. Thank you for your continued support of the committee's deliberations in this matter, and could I draw attention to members of your tabled items folder. The department has provided a response to queries raised at last week's meeting regarding staff transfer scheme, consideration of the qualified voting majority clause. Again, on tab 4 of your bill folder, or page 22 of your electronic pack, you will have a table of responses and so on, queries and responses. So on that basis, then could I just then leave it to Henry and your team there to I suppose continue on your explanations.
That's right. Following on from last week, the committee reviewed the department in relation to a number of issues, and as you see in the briefing, we provided a response to the staff transfer scheme and a response in relation to the qualified majority issue. As you see, in what that issue is, we've also said that at the end of it that the Minister wants to take time to consider that issue further, and we'll come back with a response to the committee report.
Could I ask Henry, sorry, but is that possible to have that by Tuesday of next week, you know?
I don't know.
Well, I just wanted to make a general point then, maybe before you would start, because clearly we're taking your opinions, your responses today, and that's going to be very, very helpful. And then next Tuesday, then, you know, informally we're going to go through clause by clause, and hopefully then do that formally on Thursday, which would mean we would complete our committee stage. But clearly there are issues which have been raised which may have the committee wanting to maybe make amendments, or hopefully the department may make amendments. So I'm just trying to, in terms of expediting some people's concerns here, I suppose if you're giving us an indication that the Minister wants to look at some stuff, that's very helpful, so that we know that that's still in the mix for development. But it means then for us next week, you know, people may wish to be thinking of amendments. So we could maybe, if needs be, stop short of a formal amendment, but make a report to a recommendation or advice to the Minister that we would like to see something developed further. Isn't that right? I mean,
Yes, that's fine.
I'm just trying to get the mind of the committee here, because people may be minded to make amendments, but those amendments may not be necessary if the Minister's going to maybe develop something further. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So okay. So Henry, thank you. Go ahead.
I don't know what way you want to play this, Chair. We've produced a number of tables in relation to the comments which have been received as part of the committee's call for evidence. And we've produced 2 tables there, clause by clause, and a table. There's a significant number of issues in there. There's a lot of repetition in terms of different respondees raising similar types of issues. So it's a very detailed summary. I was wondering whether it be appropriate for the committee to sort of, if they want to pick out issues and ask us on them rather than reading through this laborious. It's up to the chair.
Okay, I mean, well, that's helpful. I mean, but what I could suggest is that, I mean, there are a number of, I suppose, key areas of concern that members would have had, and we've had some address of that, but like, so for example, there were some concerns around, well, what's the definition of social need? So, for example, you want to transfer a function to local government, you've got 11 councils, you want to transfer those functions to local government so that they can tailor the functions and use the funding in a way which probably best meets the needs of their particular area. The downside of that is some people suggest is that could lead you to 7 or 11 entirely different models, which may or may not be right or wrong. You did cover that, notwithstanding the theoretical view that the councils can do whatever they wish. That was somebody else's word, not mine. But you also did identify that there's a framework within which people have to work anyway, not least the local government order, social need order, community planning processes, call-ins. So you may want to just elaborate on that, because that was a concern that when you transfer the functions, so the good intentions may falter area by area. But can you maybe give some satisfaction? There is a framework within which people have to discharge their functions.
Yes. For completeness, in response to the committee, I included a note of the framework under which councils will operate. That's Appendix 3 of the response on the 22nd of April. And it sets out a very detailed sort of framework in which councils will have to deliver these responsibilities post-2016. The first part of it is guidance from the department, which councils will have to have regard to, and that includes a framework, the Urban Regeneration and Community Development Policy Framework. And this document sets out the key themes that we want to see tackled. So they're required to tackle area-based deprivation to strengthen competitiveness of towns and cities, improve linkages between areas of need and areas of opportunity, and develop more cohesive and engaged communities. Now, the framework is only the start of the process in terms of guidance, but obviously we will be developing further guidance as this process goes through, and that guidance will be developed in consultation with councils. But there's a requirement for councils then to have regard to that and show that they've had regard to it in taking the decisions. Councils will also have to operate within the community planning framework, and the council's role is to bring forward all the functions which are going to them into one cohesive plan. So that will reflect the needs and the social needs in the area. And the Local Government Act itself has a significant number of powers in there for departments to intervene in circumstances where they feel that the functions or the responsibilities aren't being properly delivered. Now, as I said at the last meeting, that's something that you wouldn't want to be predicting at the start of the process, but it is there as a safeguard at the end of the process if things aren't going right. And you talk about things like you can request reports from councils, you can carry out investigation inquiries concerning the administration of any transferred function, and if you're not satisfied, then you can make an order to the chair and the council be in default, and you can direct it to take remedial action. And then, should the council fail to respond, the department can intervene directly or procure alternative services. Following on from that, in relation to any financial assistance provided by a council, they're subject to scrutiny by the local government auditor. Councils are also required, as government departments, to adhere to Section 75 of the Northern Ireland Act in relation to promotion of quality of opportunity and good relations. It also has to follow the Code of Conduct, which was approved by the Assembly on the 27th of May 2014. And this sets out the rules which councillors will have to follow. And it also sets out the sanctions that can be applied if the commissioner, by the commissioner, if they say that the person has failed to comply with the code. So that is a fairly substantial framework of the controls, if you want to call them controls, that councils have to operate under. Having said that, there is still flexibility for councils to make their own decisions. But again, we'll go back to what the executive decided. The executive decided that councils were now in a position to take on these responsibilities, and they were best placed to make these decisions and judgments for themselves. So that's the framework.
Okay. Okay, I mean, we don't need to be debating all those things. What we're looking here is to get explanations and further information that we might need, which allows us then to return to these things. Sam and then Stuart.
Okay. Could I just, there's three areas I really want to talk about. First of all, the definition of social need. In your note, and also in your explanation, you've said that really the definition can be fairly wide. It might be applied in different ways at different times, might be used in education, free school meals, or its indices. But given that this is a regeneration bill, and given that social need is so loosely defined, do we actually need to have social need mentioned in it at all? I mean, there's two ways you can go. You can either tighten the definition, or else you can simply say this is a regeneration bill, and if a council identifies that an area which will, by regenerating an area, it will be good for the council area, and they make a decision on the basis of where they see action being effective. But the halfway house that you've got, is it used to anybody?
Well, the history of Robbie's is it's reflecting what the department has done over the last number of years.
Yes, but just because
I understand that, but in terms of it's reflecting what was in that bill and transposed it and saying those powers are now conferred upon councils as well. So rather than changing those powers, we're saying we're conferring what we've got. It's worked successfully for the department, and we're conferring that on councils. But well, I take your point that there is a catch-all in there which says councils can do anything if they feel it is for the benefit of the area. Yeah, associated with the area.
So, well, you know, we could argue, if you look actually at the history of regeneration back from when I first started in Belfast City Council, and you had the ban areas up to now, and some of the same places are getting action taken on them. We're getting action taken on them in 1981. So you could argue whether or not, you know, that kind of policy has been effective. But if, you know, either you have a tight definition of social need, which targets money to particular areas, which I believe is probably not the best way forward, or else you simply say you've got a power of regeneration, or you decide where you want to have regeneration. But do we actually need, given the looseness of the definition that you've got here, do we actually need the term social need in this legislation at all?
Well, I think if you tighten the definition, then effectively you're transferring this responsibility to councils and tying their hands. So the other option would be to say, it's over to you, councils, you determine where the social needs are, and you make... So
why put any tie in their hands? Why not just say you've got a power to regenerate your area, and you have the choices to make as to where that regeneration is from?
Well, that's obviously the minister has decided to do it this way, in terms of conferring the powers that we have listed onto councils and letting them operate under the same sort of flexibilities that the department has been able to operate.
Is a social need reference not really just paying lip service to what people believe might be acceptable, but it doesn't really have any, that's what you're really saying, it doesn't have any effect anyway, does it? Because the council can choose whatever areas they wish to regenerate.
Yes, well, as I said at the last meeting, the reason why those sort of examples were put in was just for that purpose, to give councils an idea of the type of things that could be supported under the social need. You're right, there is a catch-all in there which says that councils can make their own decisions in terms of, and we explained that the list of the types of things has evolved over the years. The types of things that the department has supported has evolved over the years. as time has moved on and as social needs have changed.
See, just in terms of monitoring the councils, under what circumstances, you've said that you don't wish to be kind of moving in and acting quickly against councils, but in what circumstances would BSD step in? Can you give us some practical examples? You've said where they're not delivering their functions or whatever. Can you give me?
Well, it's hard to predict in the future. I can't really say. The fact is that we're proposing to confer these powers on councils in good faith in terms of we think that now's the time that local government can deliver these responsibilities. The executive has agreed that, and we want to give councils an opportunity to do this the way we've been doing it. But obviously there's these call-in powers further down the line if we're wrong. But I can't predict what that might be.
You've two areas where regeneration is going to be kept within the department. First of all, there is this monitoring function, and secondly, there's the function where you produce your own development plans if you think that it's appropriate for the department to do it, and I suppose consequent to that then the delivery of those plans. Can you describe the circumstances, because there is a substantial part of the bill, the circumstances in which the department would step in and say, okay, it's not that we're saying the council isn't doing it, the thing, we're simply going to take over the responsibility of drawing up the plan and development plan and delivering it?
I think this sort of mirrors the approach in planning, where the department has reserved the power to decide on planning applications which are considered to be reasonably significant. I think if we were drafting this bill, we thought that that would be appropriate, that there might be circumstances in the future where something was considered to be of significance to more than the whole of Northern Ireland or a substantial part of Northern Ireland, and maybe a council wasn't best placed to take it forward. Councils weren't in a position to take it forward or didn't want to take it forward, but the department, the minister, the executive decided that it was so important that it needs to be taken forward, and that power has been kept within the department to be able to do a development scheme of that nature. But as I also explained, development schemes are very few and far between. We have, as a department, has taken forward one development scheme in the last 10 years. That was Victoria Square. And whether something of that scale would be considered to be regionally significant or not, I don't know what it's going to be like in the future. But that's the sort of level of involvement that the department envisages in terms of development schemes. It's going to be few and far between.
Well, and will the department have a set-aside budget for this?
No.
So there'll be no better off than the council would be in terms of their resources. It would have to go into their resources.
It would probably be an issue at the time to say whether there be resources available somewhere.
Right. So as far as the monitoring is concerned, you're saying it's going to be fairly limited. And as far as the intervention is concerned, it's going to be fairly limited. How many people will be retained in the department then as part of the regeneration team?
All the posts which are currently engaged in delivering regeneration in development offices will be gone as a result of the transfer. So there will be no, unless there is a specific area of work that the Minister decides he wants the department to retain a lead function on. So at this point, nobody will be retained to carry out these.
So you've no staff either to do the monitoring, to do the special development plans for where they're regionally significant.
Okay. I just referred to the development offices. You actually deliver the work in the towns and villages or the cities that we work in, and then there's another group of staff who work in the centre of the department who monitor the budgets and the expenditure of the finance. Now, what's being proposed at the minute is that any new relationship that we have with local government will be resourced with the staff who had previously been managing those kind of central finance and policy functions in relation to delivery and regeneration at present. So there'll be no additional posts created, and we're trying to do it within the resources we have available and meet the requirement to actually reduce our headcounts.
So for the things that you're attaining within the bill for the department in terms of regeneration, you're saying there's little or no resource implication in terms of staff and money?
No, the circumstances in which to take forward a development scheme of regional significance, it would have to be a specific case made for that, and then resources allocated towards it if the department was going to take something of that nature or scale on. That's not really that much different from the current situation, because whenever the Victoria Square scheme was taken forward, a special team had to be created and resourced in the department to take that forward.
Okay, Chairman, I think that's all I want to ask for.
Okay, so Stuart?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming to us this morning with all of this. In your Appendix 3, the guidance that you've set out, one of the bullet points says to improve linkages between areas of need and areas of opportunity. Can you just explain to me how that will be managed in terms of two councils back to back? In other words, one where the area of need is in Council A and the area of opportunity is in Council B. And I can think of numerous communities that sit either side of that line between local authorities back to back. How will that be managed, and what duty will there be on councils to collaborate in terms of that? Because obviously the Council of Opportunity may feel that they have the opportunity and they want to develop it into their council area rather than across a boundary into another council area. So if you could just sort of explain to me how you will manage, monitor, and indeed how the bill caters for those areas of need which back onto areas of opportunity across boundaries. And I have a staff question to ask you as well.
Okay. That objective in the framework was developed as part of an analysis which identified that quite often in cities and towns you have disadvantaged communities in neighbourhood renewal areas, then you would possibly have quite prosperous town centres. So one case in particular is Ballymena, for example, where there's a very thriving town centre, and then there are disadvantaged communities around it which appear to be disconnected from it, and the situation is worse to some extent in Belfast, where there are areas of the city where people take will say to you that they very rarely visit the city centre or wouldn't choose to go to work in another part of the city because it would involve crossing, for example, an interface. And the idea behind this objective was to make sure that in urban regeneration activities you actually dealt with that kind of problem, because not all needs can be dealt with in very defined local geographical spaces. Now, the question of those linkages being over council boundaries will largely be around Belfast, I suppose, and the greater Belfast area, where you're dealing with areas, for example, Lisburn and Castlereagh and Antrim and Newton Abbey, where they abut, urban areas will abut onto the boundary of Belfast City Council.
Antrim, Newton Abbey and Newton East as well.
Yeah. I think that what we will be hoping to see will be councils actually collaborating and agreeing on how they will deal with those issues. I suppose going back to Mr Wilson's point, this is one of those areas where we would be trying to keep some sort of degree of oversight on the councils and what they're attempting to do. We haven't written into the legislation any obligation on them to do that. However, there's a duty for them to have regard to the framework in the exercise of their functions. Having regard in legislation, but essentially what it means is that the councillors are obliged to think about it and consider the issue and weigh it up, along with all the other relevant considerations that they have to take into account. And they may well decide after that consideration that they don't see any need to, or there's no priority in that kind of issue. But that's the kind of issue that we would want to be having a look at and seeing how they're operating in practice.
Yeah, and again, it's who brokers those deals. If it's quite obvious that a council has come up with a view that they don't need to do something, or they do need to do something that's detrimental to another area, and they've rationalised that, but to the rest of the world that doesn't seem a rational decision, who's actually going to arbitrate? Who's actually going to intercede at that point?
Well, ultimately, it's the Department and the Minister who have policy responsibility, and if the Department and the Minister feel that the councils aren't adequately addressing the policy objectives, then the Department would possibly seek to intervene, or the Minister would want to try to broker some kind of arrangement there.
And can you point to in the legislation where you actually have the power to do that?
The one specific issue would be the power to direct a council to make a development scheme.
But that's a very high level
yes,
direction. I'm thinking of perhaps more specific
Well, then we're going back to the framework which is set up by the Local Government Act, which will allow us to look at whether or not a council has actually delivered against its obligations. And
Yeah, I mean, I think that was my concern, and maybe the concern of other members, is that so often we see in legislation obligations on people to do X, Y, and Z, and health is as good an example as any, by other bodies, or the relationship between other bodies and central government. But the reality is that the legislation is either so weak or so vague that you can't actually get any action. And I think my fear is that if the wheels fall off, or if it's clearly something's moving in the wrong direction, it's actually very difficult to get action to bring things back on stream again. And that would be my concern, that the legislation is weak in terms of actually being able to direct.
yeah, it's a difficult balance to try to strike in the legislation. On the one hand, I understand the point you're making. You don't want to see a situation where something which really needs to be done isn't being done, and there's no mechanism for which you can make it happen. Certainly, you wouldn't want a situation in which the central department has too much ability to interfere, I suppose, in the actions of local government and decisions which are rightfully in the place of local government. It's an attempt to try to find the right level of balance between allowing the autonomy of the councils to make their own decisions through local democracy and giving sufficient oversight and guidance to make sure that beneficial things actually happen.
Okay. Just very briefly, Mr Wilson raised the point about staff, and you explained that staff in the local offices would be transferring to local government. Surely,
Just to correct that point. Yeah.
or remaining within.
The number that will transfer to local government is dependent on the number that local government say they are.
Yes.
So some will transfer, not all.
But those that leave will also, and the function that's being transferred, will require a reduction in the central support that is currently being given to those people. So I understand what you're saying, that you do need to retain a resource to actually manage the outcomes of the bill. But nevertheless, surely centrally there has to be less people, because there's less of a central function to administer.
I hope I don't bore you with the detail of this too much. We have a number of staff in our resource management unit, so their job is to monitor and manage the payments which are made, and when the department loses the responsibility to be funding individual projects, then obviously that degree of activity will reduce very substantially. Well, not cease completely, because we will still be making some payments to large organisations through the voluntary community unit, but it will be a very much reduced level of activity. There is a policy unit called the Neighbourhood Renewal Unit, which will no longer be required because we'll no longer be delivering neighbourhood renewal, so that unit will no longer be required. And then there are possibly reduced requirements for other branches, depending on how the relationship with the government develops. So we have a policy unit, for example, on urban policy, which we would need to have a look at. And clearly then also the whole team has been set up to look after the reform of local government will no longer be required.
Yeah. Can I ask, just in relation to that policy need for development? Those policies have been produced in the past, and those policies drive what you do at the moment. To what extent will those policies be transferred then into local government, and what obligations will there be on local government to pick up on those policies, or will they develop their own policies?
It's not quite as straightforward as that. There are very few actual policies covering regeneration activity. What we have are strategies which set out how the department chooses to exercise its powers. The neighbourhood renewal strategy is not so much a policy document as a kind of strategy which sets out how we intend to approach the issue of tackling deprivation.
Okay, but the same principle applies. You've got a strategy. Do those strategies transfer to local government, and are they obliged to take them on as strategies?
No, they're not.
That would be a matter of some concern. Thank you.
Right, sure, thank you. Gregory?
Yeah, thanks. Just on the issue of the department monitoring post the regeneration bill, you'd outlined about the department considering what options and how best to use the oversight powers provided. Obviously, don't want to second guess what that might be, but what are the range of likely options that there might be in terms of, I'm thinking of whether 12 months or a couple of years after the introduction, there will be varying degrees of success, you would imagine. Some might be very good examples and others not so good. So are you looking at monitoring sort of best practice so that those that have been more successful are replicated elsewhere, or what are those range of options?
The range of options for the approach that we'll take this ranges from a very light touch, where we just seek information from the councils and sort of review it, right the way through to we would actually go in and study and do evaluations of the work that's been undertaken by councils. I suppose if you want to follow that through to what you would want to do and when you might want to intervene, we're trying to think through how you would have responded in the framework where local government has responsibility for regeneration to the difficulties that were faced by town centres in about 2009-2010. So in the past 5 years or so, there's been quite an active programme of work in town centres delivered by the department with public realm schemes, revitalisation projects and urban development grants and so forth. You would obviously, the Minister would be in a position where he would be under some degree of scrutiny about what is being done to address the needs of town centres in that kind of scenario. Our role as a department in that situation would have to be then to see whether or not councils are actually taking any realistic or robust action to deal with that particular issue. And if a council was choosing to do absolutely nothing and letting its town centres decline, then that might be a situation in which the department would say, you've got to try to take this issue on and deal with it effectively, because you're not dealing with regeneration requirements of your own area. Though it's difficult, I suppose, to think about the precise situation in which you would want to get into that. You're always thinking in hypotheticals and how bad would a situation need to be before you would want to intervene, and how proactive you would want to be. But there's a range of options, but clearly we want to try to have a productive and positive relationship with local government as we move forward on this.
Yeah, I understand you're painting a fairly stark picture. You know, if there were one or more councils where virtually nothing has been done, that's fairly clear. But if you have, I would suggest in the more likely scenario that there are a number of councils that have been quite successful, but a number of other councils that have been less so, but not less so to the point that they're doing nothing, but just less successful. Is it the department's thinking that you will just let the market sort of feed that they will hopefully see the more successful ones are working and what can we do? Or is there going to be a more proactive approach by saying councils A, B and C have worked very well and the regeneration bill has produced whatever benefits there have been, and therefore you're going to intervene in some way to ensure that the others are replicating that, or what where do the options lie realistically?
Okay, well, we could just let them get on with it and let them each choose...
Or not get on with it?
Or not get on with it, and let them each choose to take whatever approach they see most suitable. The alternative might be somewhere in between, might be to have some kind of support system or unit in the department that would actually look at best practice examples and try and organise, for example, seminars and disseminate information about evaluations and what's worked well and what hasn't worked well, and try to spread the learning of good projects that have taken place. Now, it would have to be resourced in order to be able to do that. It wouldn't be a particularly large unit, I wouldn't imagine, but it would have to be a fairly proactive and sustained level of activity to achieve that. Going beyond that, you would have to be into a very, I suppose, resource-intensive regime of monitoring and scrutiny of the activities of the individual councils, and it may well be well beyond what we would actually want to have by way of a relationship.
Okay, fair enough. Okay.
Thank you. Farrell Khan, then Roy.
Chair, last week I raised some of the questions that have been raised in around the deficit need and the councils that may not move ahead and need and using money elsewhere. But accept what you have said this morning, and hopefully that there are regulations built in that will allow you to tackle that. But the bill started its life as, I think, as the Regeneration and Housing Bill. The housing element was removed from it. But I still notice through the bill there's still references to housing. What circumstances would councils be allowed to develop whether private, social or affordable housing?
The reference in clause 1 to development housing, that's in relation to the use of urban development grants. So it allows an urban development grant to be given to a property developer in order to allow a development which includes an element of residential, not just commercial property in it. That wouldn't be social housing so much as a grant to encourage or promote the regeneration of a derelict site or derelict property. And then in the production of development schemes and the promotion of the development of development schemes, it would be possible to have an element of residential development. In fact, most of them do. For example, Victoria Square has got quite a large number of apartments in it. But housing is not, in this sense, used in the terms of social housing. It's in relation to allowing residential development to be a component part of a development scheme or a regeneration project. We sometimes include an obligation to provide a certain number of social housing units in a development scheme if that meets a particular social need or a requirement in that area. It would be up to the councils to do that as well, although it doesn't give the councils any power to be social landlords or to develop social housing in that sense.
We've also said, added an extra bit in the start of that, say the financial assistance for the provision of housing requires the approval of the department. That's a sort of safeguard to ensure that people don't run me off and do things that are contrary to, say, housing policy or whatever. So there's that safeguard built in terms of the social need powers.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Roy.
One of the ideas behind devolving more powers to the local government has been to avoid duplication that happens with a range of agencies at present. And in terms of that, I'm looking at regeneration perhaps of our smaller villages and towns. And I see under a letter that you've written to us on the 3rd of April that DARD is not transferring any of its rural and social inclusion budget. How do you see these two methods of assisting rural communities operating in a joined-up fashion and in an efficient fashion? I'm just trying to understand why it has not all been brought together under local government.
Well, the decision around the DARD element of it, the Rural Development Programme, is really one for that department, to advise you on what the rationale is for their position on it. We would expect to see, and I think DARD officials have advised us to this extent, that quite a large proportion of the Rural Development Programme will be devolved to local government to deliver. So the mechanism by which these things would be joined up would be through the delivery through local government. So the new councils will have the urban regeneration powers and functions and budgets, and then they will also be given responsibility to deliver rural development in the areas. And I would hope and expect that the councils would be capable of actually making sure those things are joined together effectively in their areas.
Okay, do you see that as being the most efficient manner? And perhaps it might be if you're not going to have a central regeneration unit after all the transfer happens. Do you see that being a reasonably efficient manner?
Well, it is the rationale behind the local government reform, and that these decisions are best taken at a local level as opposed to trying to apply a one-size-fits-all approach across the whole of the province.
Yeah, and then in terms of the community investment fund, how are we going to ensure that there is what role will the department play in the future? Will this be entirely in the hands of local government to react to local needs and to be aware where there is that need at the local level and to be able to prioritise it, perhaps on a more timely basis than before? Will there be any other departmental role? Will it all sit with local government?
We'll sit with local government to make those decisions. So the community investment is a funding stream or programme that the department has operated up to this point. There are a number of projects or organisations that are supported through it. If the councils see that there's value to those organisations and projects in the areas, no doubt they will continue to support.
And could we have a list of those organisations? Some of them may operate, for instance, on a regional level, which individual councils may not be able to work together on? Is there some regional operations in terms of the current funding there?
No, the Community Investment Fund projects are local ones. There is a regional support programme which looks at regional level organisations and funds those separately, and that's not part of the transferring function.
So that's staying with the department?
It is.
Okay. And the overall budget for this, has it been declining in the past year, or is it projected to stay at its same level? Or?
Yes, the reductions have been applied to the department's budget across the board, and so the amount of money which is available to transfer to local government has been reduced also. So it is less this year than it was last year.
Okay. And you seem to have placed quite a bit of emphasis on the regeneration and community development policy framework as guidance for local government. When's the last time that has been updated? Just how current is it?
Less than 2 years ago.
Okay.
Just following on that, in terms of the linkages around between DARD and DSD in terms of, you know, different policies, folks has been discharged by the departments, and then obviously then DSD folks has been transferred over. We were told recently there that, if I remember correctly, that the DARD can't transfer ESF funds, for example. To do it or wouldn't be able to do it, but you're saying there a minute ago, I think again, there that like funds will be transferred from DARD as well as local council. I'd be more content if I kind of understood there was some clear linkage, because clearly both departments have responsibility to discharge executive commitments around technical disadvantage, and I mean, this is a policy function with transfers. Actually, transfer across to both departments really. Not trying to rewrite the script about what's transferred. That's all agreed, but this is about how we do it. So how do we make sure that there is our proper linkage? I mean, similar functions have been discharged by DARD and rural communities, as will be by DSD and urban when they're transferred to local government. Or does that work better? I think most people would like to see that work better.
Yeah, that would be I suppose a question of ensuring there's proper joined up working between the Department of Communities, as it will be, I suppose, by the time this is transferred, and the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development after the transfer takes place, and trying to ensure there's connections and linkages between those departments and their policy and their approach to make sure that these things are actually joined up. To which there has been some work around that, but I wouldn't disagree that it could have been improved. It's always a question of resources, whenever we're looking at operational issues, and so DSD has never really had the level of financial or staff resources to allow it to take a role in smaller settlements than the ones that we currently operate in.
But from April 2016, councils will also have responsibility for community planning, and government departments, including DARD, will have a responsibility to be in that process. So we would have thought that as we go forward, will be the mechanism where you could have better coordination at a local level between the DARD funding and the DSD funding, as it was, which will now be council funding.
Yeah, I don't understand that. For me, it's just in terms of trying to capture this from both sides of it. You know what I mean? From the community planning process, but also from the executive responsibilities that the departments would have to discharge. So, okay, fair enough. No other members, Jim? Sorry.
Yeah, I want to go back to the first point that Senator Wilson raised, because I share the puzzlement as to this fixation with social need in this legislation. To go a bit further, this is a regeneration bill. So why is it simply a lift of the social need order of 86 in all its language and deposited into a bill which we now call regeneration bill? Why is it not more focused on what its title purports to produce?
Regeneration is a difficult thing to define.
No more difficult than social need.
Yeah, and consequently, it means a number of different things to different people. Now, there have been different aspects to the regeneration work that the department has undertaken over the years, and that's included physical regeneration, things like Victoria Square and urban development grants and so forth, through to what might be termed to be social regeneration, where you attempt to deal with some of the underlying social problems that create and perpetuate disadvantage and deprivation. And so the range of powers that we've covered here is a transposition of the legislation. You've identified that, that's correct, but it is to try and encompass that full range of physical and social regeneration activity that the department currently delivers.
But if it's a regeneration bill, would it not just be sensible to have clause 1 expressly say that the council can do that which is required to promote economic regeneration in its district? Yes, maybe use your examples A to E, but is that not the essence of what this is meant to be about?
Well, no, as I just said, it can be broader than that. Regeneration can cover a broader range of issues than simply economic or physical redevelopment, so could cover a range of other social factors as well. And that would, your proposed wording there would actually remove the opportunity of the councils to do.
And what would we lose? What would we lose if we did?
Well, any opportunity to deal with any kind of health or education issues, unless they could be directly linked to some sort of economic development.
Well, if it could it D, the provision of social or community facilities, would you lose them?
Facilities would imply, I think, actual bricks and mortar buildings as opposed to programmes. So it would prevent, I think, any of the kind of revenue projects that are currently being funded. I know there's always going to be differences of opinion about the value of some of them, but to remove the opportunity to do any of the kind of work that we've done over the number of years, I think that you would have lost some opportunities, which are certainly been very valuable to improve areas.
But then you are very much getting down the road of one of 11 councils choosing to be very adventurous in terms of that social side of things, and others not, and a great disparity across the province. What's actually done?
Yeah. The other side of that is that I've worked in this line of work for the best part of 20 years, and the continual refrain I've heard is that we've attempted to create one-size-fits-all solutions and apply programmes which are designed to meet one set of circumstances to areas which don't suit them. And part of the logic and the rationale of local government reform is to actually try to relieve some of those tensions so that you can devise a programme in, I don't know, Ballymena or Coleraine without having reference to what's taking place in Omagh or Newry. And so the idea is that you can actually develop a scheme which meets the circumstances of your own particular location.
But the starting point has to be to set the parameters. I think that's the starting point in all this. You just want a blank canvas.
Well, it's not a completely blank canvas, but you have to allow innovation to take place, and you have to allow developments to be responded to effectively, and that's what we've attempted to create here as a framework in which there's no particular definition of social need or of regeneration to allow councils to come up with new solutions to the problems that they might face in the future and things which we may not be at this point able to predict.
Another area that's puzzling me considerably is if you're devolving these functions to the councils, you're disbanding your staff that presently administer them within the department. Why are we keeping the 1986 social need order at all?
Because there will be some parts of the department which currently make grants which will still continue to make grants. So I mentioned in relation to Mr Begg's question that there are regional organisations which will continue to be funded by the department under that order. So
under the social need order?
Yes.
Because you do have the powers of clause 13, which give you the opportunity to come in on a regional basis.
That's
to do things that,
yes.
To do a scheme. Isn't that right?
That's specifically one set of circumstances. That's a development scheme, which is a statutory amendment to an area plan. Yes. So that is one very particular type of activity. It is not
that power would not give you the power to give a grant to an organisation, and we currently fund some centrally based or Northern Ireland wide based organisations through the social need order, like Citizen Advice Bureau.
Used to be called an online voluntary trust. It's changed its name. Organisations of that level.
So you wouldn't anticipate the local Citizens Advice Bureau being funded by the council?
Some of them are locally, yes.
Yeah.
There's local grants given to them, but there's also the regional structure of the advice services that we support. I think we can provide a list of the organisations supported under the programme if you want.
Okay.
I think yeah, that'll be useful to see that. Because we're interested to see, is there already duplication?
Well, Mr. Toner would be able to advise more accurately on that, but the organisations that are funded through the Regional Support Programme have very much got a Northern Ireland-wide remit rather than a local delivery remit.
Just one other issue. We're all aware of the debacle over McCreesh Park, the naming of a play park. Any reason why this legislation couldn't include a clause which would prevent any funded project from being named in that fashion?
There's no reason why it couldn't be included. However, it would only apply to the use of the powers of particular legislation, and so it wouldn't prevent any local authority.
No.
from anything.
But any project that they fund under this could be ring-fenced in that regard.
It could potentially be, yes.
And the final question I want to ask you, in terms of the staff who are moving to councils, TUPE applies to them, surely?
It's because we're conferring powers on the local authority rather than
Could I
transfer.
refer you to an answer which I got this week from the Finance Minister, asking him whether the arrangements apply of TUPE in regard to Northern Ireland civil service staff whose functions are transferring to local government under local government reform. To which the answer is, TUPE apply and exist to protect the contractual terms and conditions of Northern Ireland civil service staff affected by local government reform.
If the functions transfer in, yes, TUPE does apply, so it has applied to the planning service staff that will transfer, and under the functions relating to Laganshire contained within our bill, a member of staff who is employed to deliver that function will transfer to Belfast City Council under TUPE. The issue we have is, however, that the rest of the bill relates to the conferral of powers on the council as opposed to a transfer of functions. That's because our legislation is permissive, so you'll see all the way through the bill it says that the council may and the department may and so on. We're not under any obligation to do any particular thing in any particular way, and unlike the planning framework, there's not a system of policy statements which underpin the application of the legislation. So consequently, the legal advice we got is that there's not a discrete economic function or economic activity as a function which can be transferred to local government, and consequently then when the powers are conferred on the new councils, there's no TUPE-related transfer. So we could, you could, the department could, and the civil service could, if it wanted to, write into the legislation a TUPE-type provision relating to the staff that are involved. However, our engagement with the councils over a period of about a year found that the councils are also in a bit of a position where they're having to try to reduce the number of staff that they have got during the process of amalgamation of the two organisations, and are left with a number of surplus people. And what they don't want to see happen is a large number of people being transferred out of central government into local government to exacerbate that particular problem which we have. Civil service is a much larger organisation, and is therefore able to absorb that pressure much better than local government was, and the arrangement that we've come to is that staff will transfer from the department to a new council if the council needs those people, and if the individual member staff are willing to go, and if the department is able to let them go and doesn't have another requirement for them. So it's a three-way kind of agreement. Out of that arrangement, we don't expect to see more than about 50 of the current 180 transferring out on the basis of the feedback we've got so far, but we've given the councils until the end of June to let us know how many they might need.
What happens to the other 130?
Then they'll be declared, the posts are declared surplus, and therefore the staff will have to be redeployed into other posts in the civil service.
And you don't think that this involves the transfer effectively of functions?
Well, the advice that we got was that because we're conferring powers on the councils as opposed to obliging them to take forward a particular role with mandatory legislation supported by a framework of policy statements in the same format that, for example, planning has, then this is not a discrete economic function which is transferring, and therefore TUPE doesn't apply.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, could I follow up on that there? Because could that then suggest that, are you suggesting then the local government then would make a determination that the staff that they currently have could actually be employed to discharge those functions? If that is the case, how do we know that those staff would be skilled up, if you like, to deliver this type of work? Because clearly a lot of people involved in this work have years of experience, got to know organisations, got to know communities. There's a kind of fair high level and also cold face experience gained over the years by a number of these staff, which may not necessarily be the case in local government, and so there might need to be some phasing in of this. So I think people would genuinely have concerns around that.
Well, obviously, we're working closely with each of the new councils over the next couple of months to help them work out how many people they might need and what kind of skill sets they might require. In the discussions, some of the things that are emerging are a little bit surprising. You know, we might have expected them to have shortages in some areas, but it turns out it's actually in others. And one particular area of concern appears to be people who have ability to manage capital projects, of which, of course, we have a number. And that applies in some areas, but not in all. And already one council has come back and said they won't require any staff from DSD. They don't expect to require any staff from DSD after the transfer takes place, but we're expecting the others to come back with at least some requirements as we move forward. And there are particular projects that we're working on at the minute where the councils will be very keen to get the staff involved, but those projects tend to be time bounded. So we've tried to take account of all of that in our arrangements as well.
You have to bear in mind also that councils already have numbers of staff who are skilled up in things like grants, making community development grants already. So there will be those type of skills already in the council. So it's not as if they have nobody there who can do this type of work. This type of work is sort of those skills are transferable. As Ian says, key skills such as managing big physical development projects, those are the things councils may well want to access.
Well, I mean, I presume all of us will want this to work and to work very, very effectively, and we're looking forward to that. And we can all give some very, very good examples of councils which are doing some very, very good and innovative work. So they do have people, you rightly say, are carrying out this work. But I would like to think that there would be quite a rigorous examination of all of those, because if the councils come back and say we don't need anybody, I would flag up in my head, well, either they've been carrying a lot of staff that they may not needed to do, or where's their thinking in terms of what they might actually have to do, because this is quite an important function being transferred. So if somebody's telling me they don't need anybody, I'd be a bit concerned. Now, it might be very, very rational basis upon which that judgment would be made by the council. I don't want to second guess that, but I'm just saying it was flag in my mind. Let's have another look at that. So I'm just presuming and hoping that there would be a very rigorous approach to all of this within these deliberations. That's a comment.
Is there an element, Ian, because there had been some controversy some time ago where a lot of the DSD staff had said under no circumstances they'd want to go to the councils anyway. Is there an element that councils are reluctant to take on staff that they feel aren't going to be willing workers or willing transferees?
That's one of the points that they did make. Equally, they also said they didn't want to be obliged to take people that they had no purpose for. So there are a number of different factors we've tried to take account of here and produce a flexible system which will allow those staff who are keen to work in councils, and there are a small-ish number who really don't want to work out in local government. They see their futures being civil servants as opposed to local government workers, and some who are quite keen to go with their work because they like their type of job, and some who, for family and other reasons, it suits them to work close to home. So trying to take account of all those different factors and produce a system which will work. But I don't think that's actually driving the decisions that the councils are making about the numbers that they might need, because by and large they do, with the one exception so far, say that they need the kinds of skills that the department has.
You're looking back in?
Just one point on that was, I've been following some of the debates and arguments that have been going on with it, and I've always believed that there was a high degree of experience and expertise within those in the department that have been dealing with regeneration and dealing with neighbourhood renewal. And it would be a loss, I believe, that the councils of many of those people actually weren't able to move to take on or continue that work. But given that there are civil servants in the department that are spread throughout the north, would people be capped locally within that local council, or will people be matched against different councils from a central pot?
No, the mechanics of the system and the way it will work still has to be worked out in detail, but essentially what will happen is that each council will identify a number of posts that it wants and what they'll want the people to do. All those will be circulated to all the people that currently work in the Urban Regeneration Group, and then you will be entitled to apply for those posts on secondment which you are interested in. Now, by and large, most people obviously will want to work in the council they're currently located in, although not everybody is actually working that close to home. So, for example, up in the North West Development Office, we have some people who have to travel every day from Cookstown to get to the office. So they will be more interested, for example, in the Mid-Ulster Council than they would be in the Derry City and Strabane District Council. So that's the arrangement we're trying to make sure that people have the opportunity to apply for the jobs they're most interested in. They're not obliged to go to somewhere they don't want to go. The councils aren't obliged to take what they don't want.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members. All the members indicated, so unless Henry, yourself, Anthony or Ian have anything to take on the odd, then that'll go until Tuesday at 12:30. Can I ask if yourself will be available for the meeting at 12:30 on Tuesday? It's just because we'll go through, I know it's informal, but we will go through clause by clause, 23 clauses if I recall, number of schedules, just as we go through them, and people might be thinking, well, should we need to amend that? And you might say, well, in the way in which you've done the other day, so I dare say your presence, no doubt, will be very, very helpful to us. You may be able to position to say, well, you may not need to necessarily have an amendment, or because the department are continuing to think about that. So it might suffice for us to make a recommendation back of that deliberation as well. It's just to facilitate us.
Chairman, see, just the mechanics, if there are changes that we want to make, does prior notification have to be given before the meeting, or to simply discuss those at the meeting?
Well, the purpose of the informal is so we can sort of tease all of that out and bring it through clause by clause, and then obviously the ideal then you'll come back on the Thursday. It's a bit of a tight time frame, turning it around from Tuesday to Thursday, but we do wish to obviously we'll have to comply with the federation state.
Have we an option of extending the time to consider the bill?
I don't believe we have, because we haven't applied within the 30 days.
No, Chair, this is an extension. 20th of May
No,
is
we've got an extension, but there's an option. We could get another extension if we ask, could we?
No.
No.
No, because to get a second extension, one has to apply again within the original 30-day time period.
Okay.
So we're out of time on that.
And obviously the complication for us is then the Assembly's really, in effect, not functioning on the following week. So that gives us a problem. Okay. So could I thank Henry, yourself and your team this morning for that very helpful information for us and one of the queries members had. Thank you. Moving on then, members, then to the next item, which is the workability assessment. We have a briefing from the Social Security Agency, and this is around the Dr. Lesfie's fifth review of the work capability assessment. And this morning we have Geraldine Brereton and Pauline Collins to brief the committee on this. Okay, so could I formally welcome Geraldine, yourself and Pauline here this morning, and you haven't been detained too long. So.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll just leave it to yourselves then. Obviously this is the Dr. Lesfie's fifth review of the WCA, so on that basis the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, can I thank you and the members for the opportunity to attend the committee this meeting to provide you with an update on Dr. Litchfield's fifth independent review of the work capability assessment. I'm joined this morning by Pauline Collins, the agency's Health and Assessment Advisor. Before considering Dr. Litchfield's review and to provide some context, it might be helpful to give you some information about the current ESSA caseload. At the 20th of March, the ESSA live load was 116,574 payments, and that was made up of 68% of claimants, slightly over 79,000, in the support group, 18%, about 21,000 claimants in the work-related activity group, 11,000 odd claimants in the assessment phase, which means they haven't completed the WCA process, and 4%, 4,600 odd claimants were receiving credits only ESSA. That gives you a sense of what the caseload's made up of. In the year ending March 2015, there were 59,000 odd work capability assessments completed by the medical provider, and during this period 85.3% of claimants were entitled to employment support allowance following the medical process. In terms of appeals, in the year ending March 15, there were 6,383 appeals heard by the Tribunal Service, of which 36% were allowed in the claimant's favour and 64% were upheld in favour of the Department. It is worth noting that Dr Litchfield commented in his report on the fact that the great majority of claims overturned by the Tribunal Service in Northern Ireland are as a result of additional medical or oral evidence given through the appeals process, rather than the original decision being defective. Customer satisfaction levels for the WCA remain high at over 93%, and the number of customer complaints are low. Between October and December 2014, we had 7,610 WCAs completed, and we received 33 complaints during this period, which equates to 0.3% of assessments resulting in a complaint. Moving on to Dr Litchfield's fifth and final review of the work capability assessment, Dr Litchfield comments that despite the work capability assessment having been operational since 2008 and subject to multiple changes in both form and interpretation, some resulting from the independent review recommendations, the assessment remains highly controversial and is subject to much criticism. Against this backdrop, and as this is the final review of the WCA, Dr Litchfield reflects on some of the key changes that have taken place, examining the impacts on outcomes and considers what lessons may have been learned for the design of any future assessment. Dr Litchfield comments that the WCA is by no means perfect, but that there is no better replacement that can be pulled off the shelf, advising that he would let the current WCA have a period of stability. The Department very much welcomes Dr Litchfield's fact-finding visit to Northern Ireland as part of his evidence gathering. While a key element of the fifth review was to review and monitor the implementation of recommendations from the previous fourth reviews and perceptions around the WCA, Dr Litchfield also examined trends in the support group, the re-referral periods, how the WEA supports people with mental health conditions and those with learning disabilities, and new processes and information sharing across the organisations involved in the WEA process. Dr Litchfield recognised that there is scope for variation in the operational delivery of the WCA in Northern Ireland by virtue of the different legislation, different structures and separate contracts with the health assessment provider. He again recognised the key differences, including the role of the health assessment advisor, who approves healthcare professional and provides in-house quality assurance of the provider, and that's something that's unique to Northern Ireland. As recommended by Dr Litchfield in his Year 4 review, the Department has recently completed a review of the Health Assessment Advisor's role, and it has been agreed to put in place an enhanced team of Health Assessment Advisors. This recognises the wider strategic role of the Health Assessment Advisor in informing operational delivery and policy development, and in building awareness on the medical aspects of the benefit system, as well as the quality assurance of the provider. Dr Litchfield also highlights the fact that there are differences in the groups of people going through the WCA, as Northern Ireland has now completed the process of reassessing individuals in receipt of incapacity benefit, whereas this activity is still ongoing in GB. In terms of findings, Dr Litchfield has drawn comparisons with Great Britain, noting the increased number of claimants being placed in the support group, particularly the increasing trend of placing younger people, the 16 to 24-year-olds, in the support group, and the regulation of and the use of Regulation 35, which is where an individual is considered to constitute a risk of harm, so suicidal indications and stuff. Dr Litchfield flagged the issue of the high proportion of short-term re-referrals being applied to those in the support group, but recognised that the Health Assessment Advisor Pauling is currently investigating this further. Dr Litchfield commended the Department's approach to supporting young people leaving school with severe learning disabilities, and we have that relationship with the schools to make sure that they're transitioned onto ESSA once they hit that age group. In terms of appeals, Dr Litchfield commented positively on the Department's proposed risk-based approach to the attendance of presenting officers at appeals. And finally, Dr Litchfield highlights the importance of information sharing and using feedback loops for continuous improvement. We published 5 Northern Ireland specific recommendations, and the Department has accepted all of these recommendations. Progress in taking forward these 5 recommendations is as follows. So, Recommendation 29, the Department is working with the medical provider Atos to put in place arrangements for the piloting of audio recording of the WCA in Belfast, Royston House and Linen Mex, Foyle and Portadown Mex from September. So, work on that is ongoing. Recommendation 30, the Department is taking forward a programme of research to better understand the nature of the ESSA caseload and in particular the increasing number of people in the support group with mental health issues, the increasing number of young people in the support group and the application of Regulation 35 at risk. The Department will provide briefing to the Committee on the findings of this research, and the current planning assumption is that the findings will be available in the autumn. Recommendation 31, the Department is considering the appropriateness and cost effectiveness of healthcare professionals attending appeal hearings going forward. Recommendation 32, which was around the sharing of information. The Department currently shares information with the Department for Employment and Learning, and we're continuing to work with DEL to identify further opportunities and processes for more effective sharing of information. With regards to the recommendation around the Tribunal Service, Recommendation 33, a database has been developed to log the current feedback from the Tribunal Service, and from this month onwards, the effectiveness of the database is being tested by the ESSA appeals team. The findings from the use of this database will inform next steps and discussions with the new President of the Tribunal Service. If we turn to the main body of the report relating to the Department for Work and Pensions, which included Northern Ireland and what was considered there, Dr Litchfield considered the development of the work capability assessment since 2008, highlighting the changes that have been made, make-up and trends in the support group, perceptions of the WCA, decision-making and processes, and groups meriting special attention, i.e. claimants with mental health conditions and with learning disabilities. Emerging themes are very similar to those identified in the Northern Ireland section of the report around the need to understand the growth in the support group and why there are increasing number of younger people placed in the support group. Ensuring that changes to the work capability assessment are properly impacted against the policy intent, so this idea around the changes that are being made and what it means against the original policy intent, and then doing much more to prepare claimants, especially those who have never gone through the WCA before, in terms of what to expect. Dr Litchfield made 28 recommendations for improvement in the WCA across the United Kingdom, and the Department has accepted 24 of those recommendations. 4 of the recommendations are not applicable to Northern Ireland. They relate to processes that don't apply in Northern Ireland, and they relate to conversations that are going on between the Department for Work and Pension and the new medical provider. As to progress in implementing the Year 1 to Year 4 recommendations, 16 of the 17 Year 1 recommendations have been completed, and the final recommendation on training of tribunal judges and members on the beneficial effects of work is something that's not within the Department's gift, and we're talking to the Tribunal Service as to how that can be taken forward. All the Year 2 and Year 3 recommendations have been implemented. Of the 37 Year 4 recommendations, all 5 of the Northern Ireland specific recommendations have been implemented, and 25 of the UK-wide recommendations have been taken forward. Work is well advanced to fully implement the remaining 7 UK-wide recommendations. These relate to data sharing, to training with decision makers, building training of decision makers, building the relationship between the healthcare professional and decision makers, and review of forms and guidance, and work is well advanced. And the current planning assumption is that we will have fully implemented the Year 4 recommendations by June. The programme of work to implement the recommendations from the review has made some significant changes and improvements to the WCA. We note Dr Litchfield's observation that the WCA being delivered today is significantly different from that designed in 2006-2008, and has counselled to let the current WCA have a period of stability. The Department will continue to take forward the programme of work to implement the remaining Year 4 and Year 5 recommendations. We've also started to engage, or we're also engaged with the BMA around the issue of medical evidence and the importance of customers and claimants having the correct medical evidence as early in the process as possible. And we're looking at ongoing training of decision makers. We also are engaged with the Department for Work and Pensions on what is the ESSA journey between going forward, given that this is the last review. We have the research ongoing, so I hope you found this briefing useful, and we're happy to take any questions.
Okay, Jerry, thank you for bringing members in. It's just 2 points. One is a simple one. I think I'm not entirely sure where ATOS or Maximus have the contract.
So Maximus have the contract in GB, ATOS still have the contract in Northern Ireland.
Thank you for that. And obviously, it's just in your last remarks, sir, you've dealt with the kind of, well, completely enemy around the issue of the appeals and the processes and success rates and needs for tribunals. So obviously a recurring kind of issue for members of this committee has always been around the high level of numbers of appeals required. We've been often told it's medical evidence, for example, has been presented at a later stage. So what satisfaction can you give us around that process? Could you seem to indicate we're talking about like training investigators or rather decision makers? So many of us actually have argued that there's a clear need to get the medical evidence in at an earlier stage. So could you maybe elaborate on the findings on that, and more importantly what the department's doing with that, because that is an ongoing problem that people have identified.
Yeah, and obviously it's 36% of appeals are upheld in the claimant's favour, and the evidence is it's because more evidence is presented or additional evidence spent. We have put in, if we have looked at the process, we have put in a decision assurance call now. So if the decision maker is minded to refuse ESSA, we contact the customer to say, look, have you any further evidence before we reach the final decision? We're about to go out with a new leaflet to claimants to say, look, the importance of medical evidence, you need to get it in early. We're working with the EMA to educate GPs who customers will go to looking for evidence, to make sure that they're aware of the importance of getting evidence in correctly.
But, sorry, Jerry, but we've had the pre-decision phone call in operation now for maybe
some time,
months.
yeah.
So, I mean, why it still seem to be a problem? And like we're again putting the onus on the claimant as opposed to the decision maker, who should know by now that they need to get the evidence in at an earlier stage. So,
at every point that we make contact with the customer, any notifications going out, any engagement we have with the customer, we are stressing how important it is for them to table all evidence as early as possible in the process. We're working with the voluntary community sector, because often the voluntary community sector will be assisting the customer to make the claim. So we're doing as much as we can, and we're looking at what other avenues there are to educate anybody that helps the customer in preparing their ESSA claim or engages with the customer, be it members of staff, be it the medical profession, be it the voluntary and advice sector, around the importance of getting medical evidence in early.
So, I mean, I do appreciate that, but do we not accept that there's still a high level of, I think you said
Absolutely.
36%.
Yeah.
I think in the last couple of years it was 40%.
Yeah.
So there's a marginal improvement, notwithstanding the fact that all parties and the agencies, including the agency itself, has recognised there's a problem.
Yeah.
I personally speaking, that doesn't appear to me as to be a high enough improvement rate. That's my assessment of it.
Well, can I say, Mr. Chairman, that as an organisation we are very focused on making sure that we get medical evidence as early as possible, because it's a waste of time for the claimant, it's a stressful time for the claimant to have to go to appeal. So, the message that we are giving out, all our guidance, all our claimant-facing material, is the need to get medical evidence up front. We continue to work, to improve that process, or to try and drive percentages up.
Okay, thank you. Gregory?
Yeah, it's just on that issue. I mean, you said 36% of appeals are upheld in the claimant's favour, which on the face of it seems quite high. But you're then qualifying that by saying, I presume that if the information was provided earlier, that would have an impact on the figure. Is it not possible then to try and strip out that element of sort of later information provided, being what, half of that or a quarter of that?
I don't have a figure. I can get you a figure. I don't have a figure at the minute as to what percentage of the 36% is due to additional FME being provided.
Because I think that would be important, Chair, because that's a very important and relevant statistic which might clarify the 36%.
We, as part of the ESSA research, we are looking at sort of at appeal what type of cases are upheld in the claimants? You know, are there trends developing particular types of cases where it's upheld in the appellants or the claimants' favour as opposed to the departments? So there's work going on in terms of trying to understand what's in that 36%, and is there more that we can do? Because obviously not all of it's due to additional medical evidence. So there's work that we're doing around that to try and understand so that we can improve the whole customer journey and reduce the number going to appeal.
Yeah, and the other thing, just on the numbers of going to appeal, you said I think it was 6,300, was that?
6,383 went,
So that's in excess of 500 a month.
yeah, it's substantial.
Going back sort of 2 or 3 years ago, is that where you might have expected it to be? Or?
No, it wasn't. When we started off on the ESSA journey in 2008, there are significantly more going to appeal than we would have anticipated. Having said that, you know, the number of there's a higher proportion of customers successfully getting onto ESSA at 85% than we originally anticipated as well. So as part of this research, we're trying to understand the policy. Obviously, we started off with a policy intention. There have been changes to the WCA which have impacted on flows and off-flows, and as part of the research we're trying to now understand what is happening with the ESSA caseload, what more do we need to do, and what support do we need to put in.
But is it the case then that the numbers overall are higher than you thought? The numbers of successful appeals are higher than you anticipated? And the workload involved in all of that, then obviously, I presume, must be much higher than you anticipated as well.
That's correct.
It is?
So we need to understand what is happening, and hence this, you know, review of, because we've now got 16,000 claimants on ESSA, different makeup, different, you know, and it hasn't behaved the way that the original policy intent would have intended. We have the majority of claimants are in the support group.
Of the 116,000 going back, whatever it was, 6, 7 years?
2008.
Yeah. At that stage, what was the anticipated figure?
The anticipated figure was that it would be less than the incapacity benefit caseload, which was 102,000. So we've already breached, we're about, IB at its height was 117,000. We're now sitting at 116,000 on ESSA, and the policy intent was that it would be less than IB. We're about to breach this month. When I say breach, we're about to exceed the IB caseload. We also didn't anticipate, you know, the original policy intent was that you would have more of the claimant base in the work-related activity group. That is not the case because we have the majority of customers in the support group. So we're, you know, why has that happened, and what more do we need to do? And that's what the research, and we're happy enough to come back and brief the committee once we've completed the research. We all, you know, probably not surprisingly, we have a high caseload with mental health concerns, mental health issues and stuff like that. And that's work, you know, that Pauline's doing with us to try and understand the makeup of the caseload and what do we need to do to support these people.
It's just if it is, and you say you anticipated it being less than the 102,000, although you didn't say how much less you anticipated it being.
I can get you those figures. They varied depending on, you know, what has happened.
It's just even if it was even if you anticipated it being a little under that, and it's now at 116, that seems to me to be a very significant increase, both numerically and percentage-wise, on what you anticipated it being in a relatively short period of time.
And that's why, if you know, going back to Dr. Litchfield's review, Dr. Litchfield's highlighted that you know, the original, where we started with the original policy intent in 2008 to where we are now in GB and in Northern Ireland, where we have significantly more people on ESA than was originally intended. And if you look at Dr. Litchfield's report, there are a series of things that have happened since 2008, which would mean it shouldn't surprise you that you have more people on ESA, because we now have completed incapacity benefit reassessment, and the majority of those customers have transferred onto ESA. So there are things that have happened in the last 8 years where the original figures were done at a point in time, and as you move from 2008 to 2014, there have been changes. There have been changes in descriptors around cancer. There's been changes, you know, so there's been changes in the actual WCA, which have meant that more people have or are entitled to the benefit.
Right.
I mean, it certainly seems to me that because I was trying to work out early on, it was 36%, because it could be 36% of a smaller number of people, but it's actually not.
It's not.
So that actually tells me that the policy intends a failure, and the outworking of the processes and the changing of the descriptors and so on has been a kind of practical response to reality,
Yeah.
as opposed to some policy intent. And that tells me then that there does need to be an overarching view of this, because what does that actually tell us about the number of people who are claiming conditions? And so there are, I think, very important and strategic important issues that need to be considered. So I think the Litchfield review is very, very important. My opinion, all it's telling me is that the policy intent failed, but it gives us a picture now of a reality that we may not like, but we need to look at it and see what we need to do to respond to that. So I'm hoping that the agency and the department and so on go back to, let's look at what is all that really telling us. The Litchfield review is never going to do that. That's looking at the processes. So I'm just putting that up as an issue for me that needs to, we all then need to be, as policymakers, legislators, need to be looking at what are the implications of those statistics, which I think are actually quite important, to say the least. So.
I think, Mr. Chairman, that is the purpose of the research, because we have the 116,000 people on a benefit. We have from Dr. Litchfield, he's identified mental health, he's identified young people, he's identified at risk. So through the work that we're doing, through the research with the Analytical Services Unit, with Pauline, we are looking to see, right, the make-up of that 116,000, because you're absolutely correct. What do we need to do to support them? What do we need to do differently? What additional things we need to put in place?
Okay, thank
So,
you.
and we'll come back and brief the committee on the research.
And you're hoping that maybe at some time
The
in
autumn,
the
yeah.
autumn?
But towards the, it's due to be completed in September, so we'd hope to come back in the autumn.
Okay, thank you for that. Roy?
I just want to focus in on this same issue you just finished on, the increased number of young people who you've identified you're transferring to ESA because of mental health and wellbeing issues. And you're trying to see how you as a department can adapt. Are you also relaying that information to other departments so that they in turn can see what preventative actions can be taken to try and be more supportive and lessen the risks of young people falling into this category with those personal difficulties?
I think that's a very important point, because we're a benefit agency. Obviously, we're working with Department for Employment and Learning on the work-related aspects. We're also working with councils, and starting to work with the councils around what they can do. Department of Education, Department of Health, and Pauline has a particular interest, obviously, from the Department of Health, because we need to make sure that these customers are, in the health service, are being managed, are being helped to actually manage their conditions. So there's cross-departmental work that we're doing, that we're starting to do. Some of it's more advanced than others, and we're happy enough to brief the committee on where that gets to. But there is an onus to work with DHS SPS as well.
I particularly think it's important that they work with the Department of Education.
Yeah.
A student contacted me highlighting what she considered to be the lack of health and wellbeing preventative work being done at school, and she was pressing that it would be a compulsory module of part of the citizenship training. Whilst apparently it is listed there, it is not actually delivered in practice in many schools. So I just ask you to pursue that with the department.
Take that away, yeah.
Okay, Sammy? Thank you.
48% of the caseload are going into the support group, is that right? 48%?
68% are in the support group.
How does that compare with the rest of the United Kingdom?
That's comparable. There's nothing sort of, and again, Dr. Litchfield picks it up, we're not out of step with the rest of GB. And I should mention as well that GB, we're engaged with the ESSA Transformation team in GB, because they also are looking at a programme of research, and we'll do comparisons, do lessons learned and stuff. So anything that's happening in Northern Ireland, GB have similar issues around at-risk, the application at risk. They have similar issues around young people as well. So Northern Ireland is not out of step with the wider United Kingdom.
And in terms of resource for the department, putting people into the support group as opposed to the work, what can you give us in practical terms what the difference would be in the resources which that requires from the department then?
In terms of the support group, obviously the support group,
All at once in,
don't engage or volunteer to engage in work-related activity. So in a sense, the support group has it's not that they're parked, they're not as intensive in terms of the activity, and it'll be in the DEL space rather than the SSA space. They obviously volunteer to participate in work-related activity. So from a DEL space, they have a lesser impact in terms of resources. In terms of the agency, obviously it's the normal, the normal maintenance of claims and change of circumstances and stuff like that. But the main impact would be in the work-related activity in DEL, and in the support group, you actually volunteer, or we would encourage you to participate in work-related activity.
Thank you, Paula. You do?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, you mentioned there about the BMA.
Yeah.
And about, I don't know, have discussions started or?
We're in early discussions. We've had a couple of meetings with the BMA because obviously it's important that doctors and consultants and that whole medical profession understand their role within the WCA process. So we have had discussions with the BMA about us as part of the continuous medical, continuous medical professionalism within that. We would attend sessions, give briefing sessions, give awareness sessions, obviously using Pauline's medical background around stressing the importance of getting evidence, supporting the customer and providing evidence to support their journey with WCA. So
Because,
it's
I mean,
early days yet.
It's
but
the quality of evidence
it's the
quite
quality,
often.
yes.
I mean, a lot of times, because we know, because they're coming through our offices, there is evidence, but the quality of the evidence does not meet what it's actually wrong with.
And
So
Pauline,
that's what, I assume that's what you're wanting them to make
That's
sure
what-
they're precise and.
Yes, because it can, it can prevent the customer having to, go through a whole big laboured process. If the evidence is good, they can be passed at scrutiny, so they may never have to go for an examination.
Yeah, and I would say it would be the same with all healthcare professionals, though.
Oh, yes, of
because
course.
that then would eliminate that need. And albeit there may be a need at times to have healthcare professionals at appeal hearings, and I know that is being considered. But if I come from a healthcare background as well, and the importance, and I would know the importance of good quality
It's
evidence.
crucial.
So I think it needs to be broadened out a little bit there.
and that's part of the reason, and I've mentioned it, why as an organisation we're growing. We've one health assessment, which is Pauline. So given the what we want to do in terms of smoothing this whole journey, being mindful that there's a customer at the heart of it, we're putting in additional, we're about to go out and recruit additional health assessment advisors so that we can grow that role. So it's not just quality, it's about education, it's about networking with the likes of other medical professionals so that they actually understand their role and their crucial role within the whole WCA process.
I think that is a crucially important point. You'd mentioned when you were talking there, I'm nearly certain, because I was jotting that many things down here, enhanced team of health advisors, did you?
That's
that what that is
That's
then?
additional. We're bringing in, we're about to recruit an additional 2.
Okay.
And then we'll review it as we go through the
And
next
you
6
see
years.
the enhancement is that the additional people have a better understanding, or?
It's to maintain the quality,
Yeah.
but also an education role, and also then to link with all of the agencies, and so therefore to understand the customers that we have and the conditions that they have. And you were talking about, making sure that there's early intervention, with health service, education and so on. So that would be the role of the enhanced team, and to sort of understand our customer base, what is actually, why we have so many people in support group, why we have so many people at risk, and particularly the 16 to 24 age group, which a large percentage of those go into support group, and they do not have to attend work-focused interviews. So we would see early intervention with those people as well as crucial in making sure that we don't, those young people don't stay on benefit if they are able to work.
It's probably worth mentioning as well, as part of the Change Fund, we have got, with DEL, we've got money to do a pilot around Want to Work, which is looking even at earlier intervention. If a customer wants to engage with us, again, working with the councils, working with the voluntary sector. So rather than waiting to the first formal work-focused interview, we'll, when the ESSA centre take the claim, we'll ask the customer, look, would you be willing to partake in a trial around much earlier intervention and not wait to the 13th week or whatever? So it's about trying to support the customer through the journey. We've also, because again, you know, the 116 are on the actual benefit, but try and stop the flows onto the benefit. There's a certain role for employers as well, health and wellbeing at work. So that we're looking at that and what can be done with employers to actually keep people in work rather than the need to flow onto the benefit.
Okay, thank you. Just one more point, and it's moving away ever so slightly here. It's to do with wording. It's on page 92, 93 of our notes, which is to do with the development, the recommendations and development of work capability assessment since 2008. It's just the wording of something that had just caught my eye when I was reading earlier, and it was to do with, albeit I agree with the sentiment around this, the recommendations and everything else, I totally agree with them. Who agreed to the wording about people liberated from prison? Do we know? Did that come from us? Did that come from... It says here the department should review its practice of routinely repeating the WCA for people liberated from prison who are in receipt of ESA, and our response from DSD was the department will seek opportunities to improve the process of those liberated from prison.
That's lifted from Dr. Litchfield.
Right, that's lifting from his. That's okay. I just wondered where liberated came
No, it
from.
wouldn't be a word that we would necessarily
I wouldn't imagine it would be a word that
Like,
a lot of us would use. You know,
Concept of liberation is a
yeah,
problem.
no, it's just liberated to me when I think of victims of sexual crimes and they never get liberated out of their prison sentence, and I just thought liberated, weird, strange. You could be liberated from hospital, or you know, liberated from the army, liberated from anything, but that was it. Yeah, even liberated. Yeah.
We're all looking liberated.
No, that was I was just to ask where the terminology came from.
We're all looking liberated from a yoke of oppression. We're back.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank
Okay,
you.
with no other members then, and Geraldine and Pauline, if you're happy enough that you've made your presentation to us and you've dealt with it, we want to thank you for dealing with members' queries and concerns, and thank you for your commitment to get back again, hopefully around autumn time is up to.
Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. Now, and good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, members, moving on then to statutory rules. We have a statutory rule SR 2016 on winter fuel allowance. Members are content, this is on page 96 of your pack. Members content to the rule, I'll read on the record. Say that the Committee for Social Development has considered the statutory rule SR 216/2015, Social Fund Winter Fuel Payment Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to the examiner of statutory rules report, has no objection to the rule. All agreed?
Great.
Okay, thank you. Just then correspondence, just reference here to page 106 of your meeting pack. The Minister has written to inform the Committee departments compiled a report following the evaluation of a neighbourhood renewal strategy prior to its conclusion in March 2015. The executive summary of the report has been provided for the Committee's information. A copy of the full report is available on request, and officials can brief the Committee if it wishes to receive briefing. Happy enough to schedule a brief at some point. Members can add to that. We'll schedule that. Okay. Page 120. Just a couple of items to draw your attention to. The Committee for Finance and Personnel agreed to forward to the Committee a response from DAP in relation to a delay in implementing the Housing Executive Pay Increment. And the DAP has advised that it has acted within the time frames and it is for DSD to implement the pay rule. Okay, so just to remind ourselves that the Committee wrote to the Department in 2013 on the same issue of a delay, and 2013 to now seems to be further delay. So, as a Committee then content to write to the Department to seek an update on the pay increment and reasons for the delay, and then we might get an answer by 2017, is that the case? We're joking. All right. Okay, so again, then page 126 of the meeting pack, Martin Mayor has written to the Committee regarding the Lagan search and rescue. You are keen to obtain the Lagan lookout. And the Mayor has requested the Committee to lend this proposal and support. We have dealt with this at some point before, I think maybe at length. We did receive a request actually from the Lagan search and rescue, and that's on page 127. And it's really in relation to their, due to, I think they might lose their current base. So they're seeking the use of a Lagan lookout, over which we have no responsibility, but it is under the jurisdiction of the department. So I mean, we could write to the department looking for clarification or whatever, or land support, but Kevin, can you remind us just, I mean, I just didn't have the opportunity to look it up yesterday when I looked at my committee notes, but we did have presentations actually from a number of organisations, at least two, if I remember correctly.
Presentations from two groups. One, which the current one, the other one is the Community Rescue Service, and members may recall, those members were on the committee at the time, there was a certain amount of tension between those two groups, and the current group, the group that the members are considering at the minute, they wish to establish a base on the Lagan, and they were really just in its infancy at the time, and the members had some concerns about getting involved in a to-ing and fro-ing between those two groups, but recognised that there was a need for a service on the Lagan. At that time, the letter gives some indication that there's been progress made for this group. I'm not sure where the other groups stand, Frank, because we haven't had any contact with them.
That's right, I remember now, thanks, because I remember, do recall, we took a presentation from both. We didn't want to get involved in two organisations vying for the use of facilities, but we did see the clear need for such a facility. So I'm presuming, unless somebody wants to make a contrary argument, that would probably likely remain our position. So can we ask the department in a way in which we're asking the department for an update, but in a way in which we would like to see a facility being there for public safety?
Chair, I agree. I remember at the time it was all a wee bit awkward.
Yeah.
It was, albeit both groups presented a good argument, but and there is definitely a need. There's no doubt about that.
Members content then we write the department on that basis then? Okay, members, thank you for that. Then just ask members any content to note the correspondence as per the memo on page 104. That's the case then. Thank you. Then for work programme at page 144. Again, obviously we're okay, that's under AOP. Under AOP, then the date and time of the next meeting is Tuesday 20th at 12:30 in room 30. Thank you, members.